All right, everybody, today we are at number 7 on our beginner saltwater fish species. One fish a lot of people see and get them into the saltwater fish keeping hobby are puffer fish. Unfortunately, most puffer fish are not for beginners. There are a few in the sharp-nosed puffer species that are great for beginners though. Today we are going to be talking about the Valentini Puffer at number 7. Here's Eli with some details for you.
Thanks for the intro, Ernie, and thank you guys for tuning into number 7 on our beginner fish list. Today is the Valentini Puffer. Most of the sharp-nosed puffers do fall into this same sort of category, so all these characteristics and their temperament is going to be very similar across the board. But these guys are really beginner-friendly puffer fish considering their max size. The Valentinis in specific only get to be about 3 or 4 inches. It should be appropriate to keep these guys in about a 29 or 30 gallon aquarium considering that they don't get too large. These are definitely a reef safe with caution species, so sometimes they are pretty successfully mixed into certain reef tanks. Especially if all you keep is soft corals, they generally don't tend to mess with many corals. If they do, oftentimes it'll be something like an acan, something that's really fleshy, and occasionally things like zoanthids and similar polyps as well. With that in mind, they generally will mess with cleanup crew. So things like snails and hermit crabs are not usually safe from the Valentini puffers or any of the other sharp noses for that matter, as this is the sort of thing that they tend to prey upon in the wild. So if you do plan on keeping one of these guys, I would plan on replacing your cleanup crew pretty regularly. If you guys haven't already seen my up-close video on these guys, definitely give that a look. That gives you a little bit more of an in-depth look as to what care really looks like for these guys. But generally, they're pretty easygoing. They're going to eat most frozen foods that you throw at them, whether that's brine shrimp, mysis shrimp, or clams on the half shell, and just feeding them once a day is generally sufficient. However, if you are concerned about, say, them preying on your cleanup crew, maybe 2 or 3 smaller feedings spread throughout the day would kind of help mitigate that issue. Feeding things like clams is honestly important with most puffer fish, as a lot of times their beaks continue to grow as they grow. So offering foods that have a hard shell, whether that's a clam on the half shell or whether you are offering even live snails or something of that effect, allows the puffer to naturally grind down its own beak so that it doesn't grow too long and kind of form an impaction for them. So it's definitely important, at least on a regular basis, to offer them something with a hard shell that they can grind their beak down on so it doesn't get too long. As the name implies, these are puffer fish and they are capable of puffing. Generally, this is a mechanism that the fish uses to avoid predation. So if you do keep these with larger fish, especially more predatory fish that stress this fish out, it is possible for them to puff. However, it's generally not something that we like to see in an aquarium. If a fish is puffing, it usually means that it's stressed out, and it's definitely not a good thing to try to provoke in this fish. On a regular interval, a lot of times these puffer fish will do kind of a practice puff. So oftentimes, especially right when the lights come on, whether it's a sharp-nosed puffer like the Valentini or even some of your larger species of puffers, sometimes do just puff and inflate their body just as a kind of a stretch in the morning. In addition to the Valentini puffers, there are a couple other sharp-nosed species, one of which being a peacock or blue-spotted puffer, which gets just a hair bigger than these guys, and they have a really cool like red, blue, and green coloration. There are also a couple of which they call Toby puffers, which are very similar. There's an Atlantic species and a couple other out there. Care for all of these guys is going to be very similar. You still get questionable reef safeness out of any of the species for basically the same reasons. As always, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning into number 7 on our beginner fish species list. Tune in to our next video to see what number 6 is.